Good morning, my love muffins. This is Reverend Sue from All Paths to God, recording live from my living room on week 10. Know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. Creation is always creating, and it doesn't need anything from us to make it work. But it does need something to work with. It needs our thoughts. Consciousness creates, thoughts are things. This is the story of creation. As Genesis said, first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God said, "Let there be," and there was. Consciousness creates, thoughts are things. And ever since we, our human family, rose in self-consciousness, took a bite out of the apple, crawled out of the water, the Word was also in us. The Word is in us. Consciousness creates, thoughts are things. Thoughts are more than things. Thoughts are the cause of things. And we can think whatever we want. Thoughts can't think themselves. And no one can dictate what thoughts we hold. So thoughts are fully in our control. Since we're in control of our thinking, and since the energy of the universe produces form in the shape of our thoughts, the tendency of our thoughts matches the tendency of our life experiences. Good, bad, happy, sad, or mad. Each tendency of thought taps the same source and uses the same law, but each creates or attracts a different result, a different outcome, a different life experience. First, there is the Word. Then there is the law acting on the Word, and it acts accordingly, according to the tendency of the thought. This is the nature of the love and the law of God. It's the dance between the mystical and the mechanical. It's co-creation between the will of God and free will. We are beings of divine roots, but we have also risen to a state that we are beings of self-determined wings. And that's really what we want. We want the security of something that's stable and reliable and consistent and predictable and unconditional. Roots. And we want the freedom to be, to experiment, to experience, to learn and to grow. Wings. What's the saying about conflict? That it's not so much about wanting to be right, it's about wanting the right to be. This is what we all want, the stability of the roots, of the connection, and of the oneness, and simultaneously the flexibility and the freedom to be individualized expressions of God and grace and good. In conducting polls across the country, asking the question, what is important to you? The two most common answers were family and the freedom to live the life I choose. Well, there we have it. Roots and wings. This is what we want. Reminds me of the poem by Dennis Waitley, The Roots and Wings, which opens with, "If I had two wishes, I know what they would be. I'd wish for roots to cling to and wings to set me free." Roots of inner values, like rings within a tree, and wings of independence to seek my destiny. Notice that the poem said, roots of inner values. Even though thoughts are things, spiritual practice is not really about the things, because it's not the things, the circumstances, the experiences that have any lasting value for us. Duke University has a department, organization called the Center of Advanced Hindsight. You just got to love that, don't you? The Center of Advanced Hindsight. Their mission is making people happier, healthier, and wealthier with behavioral science. Well, you got to love that too. Well, they say things happen that change the way people value things. This can be in our awareness or beyond our awareness. It can be conscious or it can be subconscious. But things happen that change our value of things. They actually did an experiment on value using everyday coffee, cream, and sugar as the intervention. And their value measures were how good the coffee was rated and how much people were willing to pay. And what they did in normal shops where they could expect coffee, not a Starbucks that had the 9 million different kinds, but cafes that you can expect to have a cup of coffee. They set up a little coffee stand, and they had the coffee pot, they had the creamer, and they had the sugar. But in addition, they had totally unrelated condiments. Things like lemon peels and pepper and limes cut up. Things that clearly you wouldn't use for your coffee. And in one case, those extra condiments that weren't related to the coffee were displayed in little crystal glass bowls with little delicate silver serving spoons. And in other cases, those extra condiments were presented in styrofoam cups with someone just taking an ink pen and writing in their own kind of sloppy hand what the items were. And their question was, would this influence people's perception of the value of the coffee? Meaning, would they rate the coffee as tasting better in one group as opposed to the other? And would they pay differently for it? And sure enough, the group that had the eloquently displayed condiments in their little glass bowls with their little silver spoons were rated much higher than the other tasters of coffee, and they were willing to pay twice as much. Things happen that change the value of things in our lives. You all know the story of Cinderella. The tragic loss of a young girl's mother and father, and living with her stepmother and her stepsisters who neither wanted her nor were nice to her and treated her very much as a servant. And Cinderella was lonely and lost and not included in the typical family things or societal things. And then the king decided to throw a big ball to introduce the prince to the maidens in the kingdom to seek a bride. And Cinderella very much wanted to go. And as we all know, her magic fairy godmother came and bippity-boppity-boo, fixed her all up in her beautiful gown and shoes and with her horsemen in her carriage, and she went to the ball and she met and danced with the prince, who was very charmed with her. And at the strike of midnight, when everything was going to turn back to normal, running out, she dropped off her glass slipper on the floor and went home, and the prince started his search for who was this lovely maiden that he wanted to take as a bride. And of course, there was only one person in the kingdom that wore that particular size shoe. And so he fortunately found Cinderella, and they got married and lived happily ever after. Happily ever after is one of our myths. And it's one of the issues that confuse us in this study of New Thought, where we believe consciousness creates and we can change conditions by the changing of our minds, our beliefs, our convictions, and create this law of attraction to draw to us those circumstances that we want. We have this idea that we can live happily ever after with no challenges, no discord of any kind. But if we actually looked at Cinderella's story, and Richard Gardner wrote another fairy tale book called Fairy Tales for Today's Children, he actually rewrote the story of Cinderella with Cinderella going to the palace and then being disappointed because the prince was never there. The prince was off fighting in other kingdoms and off doing different types of goodwill trips, and she had lots of money. She was in this glorious, large place, but she didn't make comfortable relationships with the people in the palace. Most of the people were servants and weren't to socialize with her, and she found herself very lonely. And she couldn't relate to the interests of the prince with his hunting and his fighting and slowly but surely became disillusioned and depressed, as now she felt stuck and trapped in this, what felt like a rich mansion prison. I think of it as after the ball. Happily ever after. Well, after the ball, it's our call. Meaning, after we have circumstances in our experience that are joyous and easy and effortless because they're in line with what we would choose and what we like, and we find ourselves now challenged with a circumstance that is a disappointment, is a disillusionment, is depressing, is distressing. It is our call what that experience is like for us. Because pain is always in the moment. Suffering is in the story. So pain is in the moment that Cinderella realizes this wasn't the best choice for her, that she's not happy in this current circumstance. That's in the moment. But suffering comes from the meaning we give that circumstance and the story that we tell over and over, that she's trapped in this mansion, that there's no way out. After the ball, it's our call. We can tell a completely different story, which empowers and enables us in a completely different way. Pain is in the moment, suffering is in the story, and salvation is in a different story. It's in the undisturbed, unperturbed story of our inner sacred values. Not the value of things, which changes, but inner sacred values, values of love and peace and joy and harmony that come from the essence and the substance of the truth of who we are. It is our goal after the ball, as we're facing challenges, to hold on to this consciousness of these inner values. And as we hold our focus on those inner values, well, then the law must respond accordingly. And consequently, it must rearrange circumstances to produce well-being and to reduce ill-being. This is our power in the gift of free will and in the law of creation. Things change the way we value things. How many of you couldn't wait to get your house or to get your car or to get your spouse, where you had a very high value in those things, in those circumstances, in those experiences, those relationships? And since then, or periodically, something changed. And you didn't have the same sense of pleasure and joy and peace and harmony. Well, I noticed that with this virus that we're contending with for a historic time in our evolution. How many people prior to it would talk about just wishing they had some time to be at home? Just to be at home without a million things to do and places to go, and where they could just enjoy the sanctuary of their own home. I know that I did. And how many people, now that there's a stay home and stay safe order, immediately switch the story? Things changed, and it changed the value of the idea of staying at home. Now people feel like shut-ins, like prisoners. They're going stir crazy. Can't wait to get out and see people again. Well, of course, there's no doubt, especially with We Love Muffins, that we are looking forward to the face-to-face interaction again. But after the ball, it's our call. Every time we're faced with a challenge or a circumstance, it's up to us what story we tell to create the movement in the law that will channel into our experiences. The tendency of our thought will match the tendency of our experiences. Pain, the discovery of the virus, the loss and the sadness of the virus, those things are in the moment. Suffering is in the story. And salvation is in telling a different story. Just yesterday when I did my high noon, I have several text groups that I send out a high noon message so that we can remind each other to join in that consciousness, to hold the vision of our selves and our families and our community and our world in this healing energy of God and grace and good. And yesterday's message that came to me was, sometimes life is so copacetic, I wonder how I could ever even forget the truth of who I am. And at other times, I work to remember. So, commit to the work and bask in the wonder. Things happen to change the way we value things. There's no such thing as happily ever after. But there is happily even after. Because after the ball, it's our call. Are we external focused? Are we external value driven? In which case, we would experience severe disappointment when circumstances change for the negative. Or are we internal value focused? Focused on those essences and substance of our being that's absolutely founded in truth, in our oneness with God, and this power that is greater and wiser than we are, this power that heals, this power that restores, this power that rejuvenates. When we're inner sacred values centered, we're not denying challenging life experiences. The struggle is real, but so is God. So we're remembering, we're telling the story of grace and good in our lives. So your mission, my friends, after the ball, it's your call. Your mission is to be sacred, values centered, to be inner values centered, not external values centered, not conditions or circumstances or things centered. Rather than being results oriented, be truth oriented. Find that place where there is peace, where there is harmony, where there is oneness, where there is hope. Even if you can't see it around you in your physical experience, you can see it in your mind's eye and in your imaginations. And as your story, as your thoughts change, then the law must act on those thoughts and must rearrange circumstances in our life. So my friends, my little love muffins, go forth and be inner, sacred values centered. We are the people. Now is the time. This is the way. Namaste, Cinderella.